All right, here we are. Hi, Jerry. Hoping my sound is okay. I can't actually hear myself because I'm not plugged in, but I'm hoping my sound's better this time. I worked on that this week. Um, Here we are. Um, Nice to see Jerry here. I'm hoping we'll see some other people too. Let me know if you're online. Let me know where you're showing up from. I know there are a few people often pop in here from Austria. Bernd, great to see you. Jerry, thanks. I'm glad the sound's better. I worked for hours to try and get my Blue Yeti, this good mic, to work through this system, and it just seemed to be nothing but trouble. So now I'm using my trusty iPhone and hooking up a clip mic and hoping that that will be at least clear. Great to see you guys. Thanks for showing up, Bernd. And today is kind of an interesting um, idea. I know I advertised Bob Ross, and that's what I want to, who I want to talk about, because his way of working was quite unique in some ways, and yet it comes from the old masters, So this idea of painting wet and wet is not a brand new idea. Uh, Great to see you, Andrew. Anne, thanks for checking in. And I'm glad that the sound is good. That's important. So Bob Ross, this is a guy who really opened up painting for a lot of people. People who had never tried it before. They'd watch him at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on public television, and he's a very gentle character. It's hard not to like him as a character. He seemed genuinely enthused about everything that he was doing, and had a very specific way of working. And what he was doing was pretty safe, really, because the landscape. Well, you can paint landscapes and make them up out of your imagination if you have any imagination for that, or if you've had any experience with it. Um, and who's to say that you're wrong? That cloud can be to the left or to the right, or you can, put things wherever you want to. I mean, you can build a mountain behind and then put trees in front and have a river and all of that. And this is not a criticism of him, because I think he really did enjoy doing these paintings. I mean, he did them for a long time, and he was very successful at this. So many, many years ago, when I was first interested in painting and in art in high school, I thought I would give a Bob Ross painting a try. And I realized that he put down, a surface first. So he put wet paint down first, and he calls it, or he called it, liquid white. And you can still buy this stuff, by the way. It's available even through Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, it's available online. So liquid white. And of course, he had his own paint line in the end, and his own colors, and he branded himself very well. And he was a businessman. He was very clever, and he got in front of a lot of people in a very public way. And literally, there are millions of views of his paintings, or his painting style, and his demonstrations. And there's much to be learned when you see somebody doing something that is consistent and it works time after time, which it did for him, and at the same time appeal to people who had never, maybe never painted before, or maybe they're just beginning to paint. And he really did make it look easy. It's not a difficult way to paint, but one of the things that he really had going for him is this idea of wet into wet. So if you have a surface that's already wet, and in his case he used white, sometimes he even used black, and sometimes he even used just colored gesso. So he would put colored gesso down using a rag, or brushes and so on, and then paint over the gesso later with oil. So a lot of different ways to work. Seeing other folks here. Chris, thanks for showing up. This is great. Nice to see you. And Sasha, super. Some folks here from Europe, some from Toronto. That's very cool. Bernd and Sasha and Angelica, really great to see you guys. Thanks for showing up. So what I want to do today, because I didn't ever see Bob Ross painting people. He might have, but I actually don't recall ever seeing that. I just thought that I would attempt to paint a face. And this is risky because, to paint a portrait or to paint a face of someone is challenging at the best of times. But I wanted to use his technique and just talk about how that works. When you're painting over a white surface, the colors that you put on top, and the white surface is wet, the colors that you put on top get lighter every brush stroke that you make over top of the same area. And of course, it gets lighter and it gets cooler in temperature as well. So that's what white does. And the white that I'm using, because I didn't run out and buy Bob Ross's liquid white, but I looked into the formula, and basically it's titanium white. I mean, you could use zinc and titanium mix, and you can add in linseed oil, which is what I've done. You can add in quite a bit of linseed oil. Now, when you do that, of course, it takes a little longer to dry, which is good because it gives you time to work with it. His paintings are pretty much alla prima. I mean, he just, painted whatever was in front. He did three paintings apparently for every broadcast that he made. He did one as sort of a sample that he would follow. So he would create something that would look plausible and realistic in his mind. Then he did another painting to show, so he could do close-ups of his technique. So, when you see him with the brush going in and painting the clouds, and he would also do some close-ups of him cleaning his brush, which he liked to do a lot. It seemed like he got a great deal of pleasure out of cleaning his paintbrush. So, he had to be able to film all of those stages. And then, of course, he had the full-size painting, which he would be filming as well. And so he ended up with 3 paintings, as I understand, every time he did something. And there's some big warehouse somewhere that has a whole bunch of his work. I don't think he sold his originals, but because he was very successful online, he really didn't need to. He had quite a following. He produced some instruction books and so on as well. And apparently there's a school in Florida that you can go and learn the Bob Ross method of teaching. So you can become an official Bob Ross teacher if you want to. You can get like a diploma or something like that. And if you, just for fun, if you go into Google and look for an official Bob Ross instructor in your area, you may find one. I know that his methods, his way of painting was very popular in Europe when we were there. I was surprised to see that Bob Ross was, as popular as he was over there. Great way to get started painting. Why not? Just get out those paints and work the way he did, and work your way up to something that's maybe a little more complex over time. So today what I want to do, again, I want to try and paint a person. I'm going to do it kind of, let's put it this way. I'm going to combine Bob Ross and the wet and wet technique with Anders Zorn. And if you know Anders Zorn and his work and his palette, he worked with a very limited palette, which is what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to be working with titanium white and ivory black. I'm going to work with cadmium red and yellow ochre. And it's yellow ochre deep, which is an Old Holland product, and the cadmium red is an Old Holland product as well. They're good paints, and the pigment's nice. I believe that Anders Zorn worked with crimson, but cadmium red should be fine for what we're doing here. And let's see how this goes. So I'm going to show you how this technique works. and I'm hoping I won't make a big mess of it, because it's risky to do this, just kind of from scratch. I haven't painted in the Bob Ross way of painting for, well, since I was in high school. So the one that I did in high school, um, my parents were so excited, or my mother was so excited about it, that it got framed in a barn board frame, and it sat on the living room wall for years and years. And I'd kind of hide my face when guests came, because I was like, oh no, like there's an original Bob Rossi looking Andrew Judd painting. Anyhow, I was happy to be able to do that technique and create, some trees and mountains and so on. So let's see how this goes. And you're saying that there's a museum that shows his work in Holland. That's neat. That would be cool to see. Be interesting to look at the originals. Just would be fun, because you see it on TV. It looks very different on a screen than it does in real life. So it'd be kind of cool to see. Moni, thanks for showing up. This is great. All right, so I'll just get to this. Let me just do this here. Okay, you're going to see me, which isn't necessary. I just want to solo layout this one here. There we go. Okay, so you can see on my iPad over here, I have this woman's face. I don't know how close I'm going to come to that. I really don't. I'll do my best. What I want to do is actually just paint a face in here and see how that goes, working with this wet and wet technique. I've already covered this surface here with this liquid white, and I've just taken, titanium white, added a bunch of linseed oil. You can almost go as much as 50% linseed oil, believe it or not. I didn't go that far, but you want to get it to a point where, it stays wet, and the colors that you put over top that are wet, as you're putting the color over top, the white pulls through. Every brush stroke you make, it pulls through. I've pre-mixed, and I guess, I can show you this. I've pre-mixed a bunch of colors that I think I might need. So I'll just show you those. You can see I've got a number of different colors, flesh colors, some darks, and up top there you can see the cad red, ivory black, and yellow ochre. And down there a big blob of white. So let's just see how this goes. All right. First thing I want to do, and Bob would sort of start with the sky up top. He'd put the clouds in and get all of that stuff going. And he would just brush it out with a great big brush. This is a much smaller canvas than what he would work on. This is, I think it's 12 by 12 inches roughly. So I'm going to work with smaller brushes, but we'll see if we can't pull off a similar technique, a similar way of working. I'm going to start with a flesh color, a light flesh color, and put it roughly where I think the face is going to be. And I'm going to start with this lighter color, and I'm going to work into darks. At some point, I'll accent things with darks. But I'm just going to start here, just putting flesh color in. And as I'm doing that, I'm realizing that that liquid white that I put in earlier is almost drying up right now. That's interesting. So my wet and wet technique is going to be more challenging than I had anticipated. Because that's happened, bear with me. I'm going to go back into my white, and I'm going to cover the whole canvas now with more of this white, just so that I know that I'm working wet and wet. I'm just going to cover the whole canvas up right now. Because the idea of this is that the color, if it's wet underneath, will actually bleed through as you're painting. So I'm going to get this a lot wetter than I have there. I did this morning, and it's already dried up enough that it's going to create a problem with the bleed through. All right. Okay, and of course, well, maybe it's good for you to see this stage. I'm just brushing it in. That's all I'm doing. You can take a bigger brush and kind of even it out as you go, if you want to, just to keep that nice and clean. This should do it. If you don't have the right texture down, if it's not wet enough, then this effect is not going to work so well. So you want to make sure that when you put it down, that color underneath is going to bleed through into the colors that go over top of it. All right. I managed to get some paint on my iPad. Good thing is that it comes off easily. All right. So now what I want to do is, okay, I'm going to go back in again with that flesh color and just get something that's kind of in the right shape of this face. See, that's a lot better now. I've got the color underneath bleeding through. And as you see, the more brush strokes that I make, the lighter it gets because that color underneath is coming through. So that's one of the great advantages of working this way. You can continue to keep working it. One of the things you want to do is make sure that you don't lose your color harmony. And because I've pre-mixed a lot of my colors ahead of time, I know that these colors are going to work together. Hopefully they end up in the right place. That's the idea. Now I'm going to do something here. Some of you have seen me use this before. It's a proportional divider. And all I'm going to do, you can't see this, but I've got a photo, a printed photo above my canvas here. And I just want to take a measurement of this woman's head. And what I do is I actually dip the proportional divider, the tips of the proportional divider, I dip into a darker paint. So I can measure things this way. I just put that down. And you probably can't see that very well, but I can see it. There's just a couple of dots there that give me the height of this woman's head. And I want to get the width of her head here as well. So at least I have somewhat of a guide to follow. And again, I'm just dipping the tips of this proportional divider into the paint that I have on my palette. Put that down. And that gives me roughly an idea of the width of her head. And maybe just a couple of other things. I want to know where her upper lip is. So I can just grab again a little bit of paint with the tip of this proportional divider, and her upper lip is going to be in around there. And once I've got that, then I can, if this feels like cheating, you know, that's okay. You're allowed to do this, by the way. If you think the old masters didn't measure things, then you'd be wrong. So that's roughly the area her lips are going to fall in and into. And now I'm going to go with the width of her mouth. It's quite wide, actually. Surprisingly wide. There we go. So I know that roughly that's where her mouth is going to go. And while I'm at it, just get the tip of her nose and figure out where that is. This is kind of a fun way to quickly get your measurements in place. That's the tip of her nose, the top tip of her nose. And now I want to get the lower part of her nose in the right place. So I'm just going to do that. And these are just like little, that'll be the lower part of her nose in here. I really should figure out where the eyes are. So I'm going to look for the corner of the eye from her chin. I'm just going to do that up here first. So I know where the eyes are. You should never be afraid to use these tools. If they help you get your drawing right, that's the corner of one eye. And on an angle this way, that's the corner of the other eye over here. And I just want to make sure that I've got the right width between her eyes. Pretty good. That was just lucky. I want to go out to the outside corners of her eyes now. And I can do that just by putting it in there, and going to be about the same on the other side, of course. There. Oh, didn't have any paint on that side, so there we go. There. Oh, still didn't have any paint on. There we go. So her eyes actually fit into that space there, and that gives me some guidelines. I'm going to use a soft brush and start to put in some of the darker shapes, darker values. I know when I want to get the outside shape of her head working a little bit, because the outside shape of a head is what defines a person. So I'm just going to put some color in here. And this is a smaller brush than I usually like to work with, quite honestly. But this will give me at least something that I can follow with a bigger brush later if I need to. That's the lower part of her chin there, and her neck comes down into this area here. And down into this area here. And you can see working this way, it's a very soft approach. And I think that one of the things that I really like about working this way is that, again, it's very forgiving. So I'm going to get some darks in here. I'm going straight for ivory black to get some darkness in behind. Maybe I'll punch a little bit of red into that ivory black as well. And I just want to get some darkness around this face. And from my reference, I actually can't see. Okay, there's one thing I should do also. I just want to get a measurement to where the bottom of her ear is from her chin, which is right in here. Okay, that's good. Gives me an idea as to where that ear is going to go. And I'm just going to get some dark color in here in the side. You see, I'm not very concerned at this stage about trying to get things absolutely bang on, because we can correct. That's one of the nice things about painting this way. We can correct things as we go. And this whole area below her chin is actually a lot in shade. And I'm just using ivory black right now. I can bring some other colors into this later. That's one of the neat things about working this way. All right. And behind her, it just goes into darkness. Now, I'm not going to try and paint everything back there at this point. Maybe I'll save some of that till the end. I just want to get a shape that works at this stage. Okay. I don't clean my brush out like Bob Ross did. He had this really quite a setup with he'd use these big kind of house paint brushes, and he'd hit it against this little post, and I'm sure that it was a mess, this place, when he was done. But anyhow, probably covered everything with plastic, like Dexter. All right. So now what I want to do is go into some values that are in the face. I know what these shapes mean, and I can continue to keep measuring. If I need to measure to get it right, it makes a lot of sense. Take your measurements, get those right, get them in the right place. I want to measure now from the bottom of her chin, this under her chin, to the top of her eyebrow, which is going to be up there. And I want to do the same for the other eyebrow. So all of these measurements are just guidelines so that I don't, go too far off course, hopefully. And I know Okay, and Kim. Oh. Settings. Just when I thought I had everything working properly. Okay, I'm hoping you can hear me. Okay, the sound's back. That's good. I don't know why my phone kicked me out because I'm filming with my phone. Really hoping that doesn't start to happen. That wouldn't be good. Maybe I actually need to touch the screen to keep it alive. That's just weird. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I'm going to go back to this one here, again, solo layout, and we'll see if we can get this going. Bob Ross didn't seem to have these kind of problems because he filmed everything ahead of time, and then, of course, that was published. So he was smarter than me that way. All right, I just want to get into getting some of these values in the right place now. I'm going to go into this shade side, shadow side of her face, and try and get these shapes to work properly. Now, every time I make a brush stroke, of course, this area, this light color underneath comes through. So every time I make a brush stroke, I have to remember that that white is going to keep coming through, which is fine. That can work for me as I go into the light. So it's kind of like painting from dark to light, but you've already got light down there, which is kind of a very strange thing to think about, strange way of working in some ways, but it does work. So hopefully it works. Let's see. Okay, now I'm going up here into the, I want to get the sense of the light and shade in her eyes. I want to get that working. I brought a little bit of warmth into that. This is cooler light, and it's cooler light, which means that you have warmer shadows. So this is a soft approach. I can actually soften all of this stuff down. Every time I make a brush stroke, I know that there's paint underneath, and if I want to, I can take a bigger brush, and I'm just going to do that. I'll show you how that works. I can just go over that very gently and soften that down. And every time you do this, you want to clean your brush off. So I keep some paper towel here and just keep cleaning my brush off. So I can really soften these things down as I go, or I can do it all later. So, you know, you have options when you work this way because it's wet paint. We're painting wet into wet. That's the joy of working this way. It looks like you've done a ton of work and really, you know, you haven't. It's just trying to put the right features in the right place with the right color. That's all it is. That's all it is. Let's see if we can do that. So I know the mouth goes in here. And I have that little mark that shows me that was the upper lip. And let's go with something a little bit lighter and a little stronger for the lower lip. It's not a very confident brush stroke. It's okay. We can get back to it, correct when we need to. Everything's still clear for you guys. Hopefully that's good. Okay. I'm watching my screen over here at the same time, hoping that this phone doesn't kick me out again. All right, I want to get this shadow area that's coming in underneath that lower lip. So let's just get that in. I would have loved to see Bob Ross paint some people. I think that would have been kind of fun. But he was kind of really into nature, so that was his thing. And I'm working with a very soft brush right now. It's like a filbert, and it gives me some good control. I can draw with that. I'm not getting into any super fine details at this point in time. I just want to get my big values working first. I know that the nose goes in here, and it's just a shape without getting into all kinds of complication. Try and keep it simple. Try and keep my values correct. Noses are always challenging, getting those shapes to work properly. Okay. What I like about this technique is that you can really soften things into each other, because again, it's wet paint, but you don't want to make you don't want to make it look dirty. Like that's the thing when you're working with color. And again, this is a limited palette, so in theory it should all be harmonious in color. I want to keep that upper lip a little darker. I'm going to clean that brush out and start to get some values into other areas here. So starting with a flesh color like that gives me something to work with, because if I want to get some lights into that, it's easy enough to do by bringing some white in. Like I can bring some white into this here, but it's a little early to be doing that. So I just want to show you that having a little bit of color down already gives you the opportunity of pulling things into the highlights and also subtly bringing things into shadow. So I'm going to go along the side of her face now, because she has some real structure in her face here. And that's a little dark, but because I know that the more I brush it out, the lighter it gets, that works for me here. I have to think that back in the 50s and 60s, that a lot of the pinup art was probably done this way, wet into wet. And also not just the pinup art, but guys like Haddon Sundblom. I think he might have even done some pinup art, if I'm not mistaken. But Haddon Sundblom was the guy who basically gave us what we know as the modern Coca-Cola Santa Claus. And if you look him up, you'll see he did a lot of other illustrations, but his technique was very much a wet into wet way of working. Bold brush strokes, bolder than mine. Anders Zorn is another guy. You can see how his bold brushwork and his understanding of values and getting those lights and darks in the right place worked so well for him. So right now I'm just trying to caress out some of the shapes and the values that I see. Corners of the mouth, get that working. I can go into the other side, try and get the corner of the mouth working there. Can't remember if I said hi to you, Rita. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. It's really nice when I see some familiar faces coming in here. Okay, I'm going to take Some values down the side of the nose here. Again, they're very subtle. And one of the things that I did by making these marks to see where things are, that was actually the corner of the eye there. I have to be aware of my overall shapes. Just be alert to where the big shapes are. So that was the corner of the eye there. I need to put in where the eye is going to go roughly. It's going to go in here. And on the other side, over here also. And again, I'm not trying to get into a whole lot of super detail. It's very dangerous to get into too much detail at this stage, because if I do, I lose the overall picture. You want to try and paint the whole picture at the same time, if at all possible. Or as many parts of it at the same time as you can. Always looking at the overall picture. That's something that is really important. Look at the overall, because that's how we see. I'm seeing my phone so far is hanging in there. That's good. I just touch it now and then because I think that's what keeps it alive. Of course, that makes it all shaky too. It's a moving picture. All right. I want to get into the values on the side of the head up here. Make sure they're working. And I'm going to go a little darker with the areas in around the ears here. They don't stand out much in the photo. This is where the photo really helps a lot. You know, it's amazing when you think going way back when we didn't have photography, what the artists were able to do. Just by measuring things, by being able to draw very carefully, measuring things out, they were able to recreate the things that were in front of them with a paintbrush. It's fantastic. I want to bring a little bit of warmth where it turns into the shadow. So we have cool light, warm shadow. And the reason why the shadow, even though it's gray, I know it's warm because I put some cadmium red into these shadows. And maybe I can even accentuate that more. If I do this sort of thing here. This is where I want to be careful to get the shapes right of the head. Not a lot of brush work. I don't need a whole ton of brush work to make this work. I just want to try to be accurate when I am putting these shapes in. The nice thing about wet and wet is when you have areas like this, if you want to soften them down, it's really easy to do that. Now, if you compare what I've done here compared to the image that I'm working with, you can see, you know, I'm definitely not there, but I've got the basis down, and it gives me a place to start with. And you start to sculpt your shapes as you go and make these shapes work. Looking at halftone areas, they're the tricky areas. Those kind of things are really tricky. You want to really be thinking about your values. Look at where the lights are. Squint at your work, always squinting to make sure that you're simplifying as much as you possibly can the values and shapes that are in front of you. There's another thing. When you're painting things like this, where you have so many sort of smooth lines, try and keep your shapes more angular, because you can always soften them down later. We always sort of look at, the smoothness of someone's face, but actually there's lots of angles going on, and if you work it more architecturally, if that makes any sense, it makes the program a little easier. Okay. I want to get up here and get some of the lights that are going on in the forehead. Again, it's cool light, so I'm pretty much using straight white, but because there's a bit of color underneath that's bleeding through, that gives me a chance to create some subtle values as I go. If any of you know Skip Lipke's work, I have a feeling this is very much like how he works. Wet into wet would be the manner in which he would get that wet and wet feeling in his paintings. Again, always trying to keep a clean brush and keep it fresh. I can go back into that little shape that I just made with a clean brush and subtly pull the color that's underneath into the right place. Again, really trying to keep these shapes as simple as I can so that later on I can go back and detail it out where I need to. Okay. Now I really want to go back to the outside. When I find I'm getting too much into like fiddly details, I try to go back to the large shapes again and, look at the broad picture so that things look relative to each other. Again, trying to paint the whole painting as much as I possibly can, keeping the eye moving around the whole picture while you're doing this. That really helps a lot. I can see there's quite a rich, dark area underneath the chin here, and that will help make this chin stand out when I put this in here. And then when it goes into the shadow area behind, it softens off. And because the paint underneath is wet, it gives me a chance to create the values that I need to by gently brushing these in here. It's a fascinating way to paint. I haven't done this for a long time, and it's fun to do. I'd forgotten how much fun this is. I really recommend you try it if you want to. It's not exactly Bob Ross. Make it your own. You get these darks working in here, in her neck. Looking at the values, I have to think that John Singer Sargent also worked in a way that was wet and wet. I know that he used to scrape his paintings down at the end of the day when he didn't like it, but the paints were probably still wet to a degree, and there would be a shadowing of the shapes that he had the day before. Because when you scrape your canvas down, it leaves residual on the canvas, and you can actually see your drawing from what you've done previously through the old paint that's left there. So I could take a palette knife. I'm not going to do it right now. If it turns out really badly, maybe I will, but just take a palette knife and go right through this whole thing, and it will leave this image here in a ghosted way. So that's kind of neat when you think about it. You can always get back to your image or the underpainting anytime you want to, and then paint over that again, of course. Got that ear a little bit low, so let's just do a little bit of plastic surgery here. Pull it a little higher. And the top of the ear is a little bit warm up in here. Just get a little bit of that warmth in there. While we're at it, bring a tiny bit of warmth into that cheek there. Again, I'm trying to, as much as I can, look at the whole picture. I want to get a little more color in her lips also while I'm at it. One of the hardest things in the world to paint is a beautiful model face. It's just very difficult to do because you have to be precise. If something doesn't fit in the right place, then, well, it looks very strange, can I say? So, being accurate at this stage to try and get things to work so that they're in the right place is a good thing. Really squinting right now to try and see where the light and shadow is. And to soften things down a little here, just sort of sneak up on these features, you know, just without getting hung up on it. I want to be precise but loose at the same time, if that makes any sense. To keep it fresh, you know, to keep your brushwork fresh is a good thing. If you use a larger brush than you think you need, that's a good place to start. There's a funny looking nose. I clean my brush. I can go back in and just correct what I need to at this stage. Again, without getting too hung up on all the little details. I'm going to bring a little bit of warmth into her nose, into the tip of her nose. So wherever you have blood coming to the surface, like the nose, the cheeks, those areas you can afford to have a little more color because the blood's closer to the surface. It's amazing how our eyes organize and our brain organizes these shapes. It doesn't take long for us to figure out this is supposed to look like a person. Just because I want to, I'm going to bring a couple of highlights into this lip at the bottom. I'll make that stand out a bit. Sometimes at this stage, I'll just go back and look at my measurements, make sure that they're in the right place before I commit too much more anywhere. And I just want to double check against my reference. Make sure that my drawing's right. So I want to go to the top of her mouth. Okay, that's fine. I want to go to the top of her eyebrow. Yeah, that's fine too. That's fine. I want to go from the top of her eyebrow down to the area underneath her eye. Okay, so that's something that I need to be a little more accurate with underneath her eye. I need to get that shape in or it's not going to look right. I don't want to put bags under her eyes. That doesn't look good. But I do want to get the shadows to work so that we understand what's going on here. I'm going to have to do the same on the other side. I just want to measure from the top of the eyebrow down. Yeah, definitely need to get some shadow in underneath here. It's starting to look a little bit more like her eyes are fitting into this area. Get some darks where they need to go. I'm going to start bringing in a few other little colors here so that we have some change going on. A little more subtlety in the colors that we see. And again, I'm just building this slowly so that as you get closer to the end, hopefully, you can see some of the areas that just need a little bit of adjustment, a little bit of fix-up. I've got that shadow very strong there. It is that way in the reference material. But when I look at it on my screen, I feel like I need to soften that just a little bit more. Okay. And it looks like her mouth could be a bit wider. So I'm just going to exaggerate this a little more. And bring her lower lip over a little further. Okay. Getting the shape of the mouth right. So apparently John Singer Sargent used to say, a portrait is a painting of someone where there's something just a little wrong with the mouth. So any of you who have ever done any portrait work know exactly what that's about. You just really want to get the shape working around the mouth. And just the slightest changes the whole expression. It's very frustrating at times. I keep touching this phone. I know it makes everything move, but I'm afraid of losing the signal on it again. So, all right, I'm go back into the hairline, again into the bigger shapes. I want to get this working here. I'm brushing in towards the forehead here, and because the paint underneath is wet, it keeps it soft. Can use a little more color in there. I think she might have had reddish sort of hair, actually. So I can afford to put a bit of that in there. Ties in with the other reds that we're seeing. Okay, so now what I want to do, because I want to get more darkness around her, I want to feel her coming out from the background, I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm just going to scrape down some of the wet paint that's behind here. And because I don't need to make the paint behind lighter, I want the paint to be darker. So I'm just getting rid of some of that wet paint that's behind. It's already on the surface. And you can see I can literally scrape over what I've done here. It's pretty thin. And like I was saying, I could really scrape over the whole thing, and that can work. But right now I just want to take this paint away so that, sorry, that's probably noisy and aggravating. There we go. That way I can get some nice richer darks in the background. Just going to clean my brush off well. And I'm going to go straight to ivory black because I know there's still some residual paint behind here. And it will come through a little bit. And I'm going to put just a touch of cadmium red into it. And let's see if we can make this disappear into the background. You can see how much white comes through there. It's pretty crazy. If I was really trying to do something, you know, very precise and do like a super good portrait, then I probably might paint the background 2 or 3 times to get some more depth into it so that it's not just flat paint. Maybe go over it with glaze, which when you glaze, of course, you get more depth in your color. But right now all I want to do is kind of knock it back so that it looks like she's coming out of the background. The lighting is truer to the photograph that I'm working from. Because it does make a difference, you know, the way we see things. If this was in full light, this would look very different, of course, because we'd be seeing more of the background and we'd be relating all the values that we see to the background. So I really want to try and imitate what I'm seeing in the photo and let this kind of come out from the shadows behind. You're probably getting a bunch of shine on that. You are. Well, I can't move that light, unfortunately, because that light is hooked up to the same thing that holds my phone. So we'll just have to leave it at that. Maybe if I do this, it'll take, yeah, that takes some of the glare away. If Bob Ross could see this, he'd probably turn over in his grave. He'd say, what is this guy doing? Doesn't look anything like my paintings. Well, sorry, Bob. Got to do it my way. All right. I'm going to actually squeeze out a little more ivory black because I want to get a little bit more dark in on one side here. You can never have too much paint, it seems. All right. Okay. Grab a little more of that black and just get some rich colors going in behind here. Ivory black tends to be a little oily and a little shiny, so I like the way that her head sort of just comes out of the shapes behind. And again, because we're painting into a wet underground painting, there are lots of ways that we can still manipulate this. I can take this big soft brush right now, for example, And these areas here that are so brutal, I can just softly go over that, soften that down, and you can see how that kind of disappears into the peripheral when I do that. And again, you're getting a lot of glare. Sorry about that. Something I have to keep in mind when I'm doing these things. For some reason, Bob managed to avoid getting too much glare in his paintings. I'll have to watch him some more to figure out how. All right. While I'm at it, I can go into this area and get some of that darkness in there. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do in those areas. Maybe nothing. Maybe we'll do the modern drippy thing. It's funny when I see artists do this. It's like, okay, well, it has more interest, maybe, or not. I'll just get a couple of drips going. This makes it artsy, right? Okay. Now back to this face again. Let's see if I can take it along a little further. How's our time? Not too bad. Okay. All right. Okay. Hoping you guys are still hearing me okay. And if you have any questions or anything while I'm working away here, I'm happy to have them. Don't be shy. All right. I'm going to go in with a very small brush right now. I just got these brushes. They're very nice. A Da Vinci Maestro, they're called. And they're a fairly strong bristle brush. So you can take colors and pull them together nicely, like this sort of thing. You can get some nice control. I'm going to just use the same brush to apply a little color in this corner of the mouth. It's pretty important that that works right there, because that's giving us the expression. And there's also a little light area over on the other side, getting the corners of the mouth to work. Sort of like the eyes. If you can get the eyes, the corners of the eyes and the corners of the mouth to work, then that can, well, it looks better, let's say. I'm going to go into just above into the mousse area here. Just clean that up. Need a little more color. At this stage, you can start to lay color in a more heavy way. But when you're painting, again, when you're painting a beauty, you have to watch you don't get too much texture, too much paint going, because it can interfere with the softness of a face. So at this stage, I'm building up the paint a little more. I can put something in like that and clean my brush off and pull All right, I hope I'm back again. Sorry about this. This is really kind of crazy. I don't know why it's doing that. I get my sound working and then my camera kicks out now and then. So maybe it's on some kind of timer that I don't know about. Got to figure this out. There's always something. I'll just keep going here. Hoping I'm back again. All right. Yeah, thanks, Sasha. Appreciate. So right now I'm just going in again with this little brush to try and get a little bit more precise in these shapes that are underneath the eyes, for example. Make sure my values are working. I always have to keep thinking about my values and the overall shapes, getting them to work. I keep squinting all the time to try and keep the light values in the right place as well. Dark values and light values have to work in the right places. This here underneath looks a little odd. So I can, again, because there's paint underneath, I'm painting wet and wet. I know that when I go into this, that when I just go over that with one brush stroke, and someone's actually trying to call. Sorry. I'm going to hang that up. If it's not one thing, it's another. That's the joy of doing this live. You never know what's going to happen. I'm sure there's a way around all of this. I'm learning as I go. So now I'm just kind of scrubbing this out a little bit, which, by the way, is not always ideal because you end up with these funny little shapes. I like to keep them smoother, but you can scrub it out first and then go back in with a softer brush and just caress the values out a little, feather them out a little. And that can work. I'm going to pull these lights over just a little that way. Okay. I want to soften this area down in here a little more. Again, with a softer brush. I don't want to get too fiddly with it. That's always a danger. But you do have to have some subtlety, right, to make this work. And with wet paint, it's a way that you can do this. If you have enough paint down and it's wet, actually that's something that's pretty important. If you don't have enough paint down, you can't do this. What you end up doing is staining the canvas instead of painting. So that's just something to think about. We're not in the business of staining, we're in the business of painting. Okay. All I'm doing right now is just sort of, creating a little more subtlety, teasing the painting into some kind of existence. I want to get more of the other kinds of colors going so that it's not boring. You know, you don't want it to be bland. I want to try and create some good color that has a bit of excitement to it. Some of the color that I pre-mixed ahead of time. I'm even going to do something here. Now, the shadows are warmer, but when I look at the original reference, there's kind of a cool cast that comes along this side of the face. And I'm just going to put a bit of a blue in here. I see it in the photo. Why not see what that looks like in the paint? I can push that idea a little further. That's a nice thing about paint, because we have the option of, you know, trying it. If you don't like it or if you need to change it, well, you can. That's okay. I want to get that shape working there a little better. Okay. And again, that dark area under her chin, I think I can be a little more precise with that. If you think I'm avoiding the eyes, you're right. Eyes always scare me. So I get a painting this far and I think, okay, now's the time I have to make a mess of it with the eyes. So here we go. I'm going to try and create something in the eyes that make them look a little bit better. I've just gone in with a darker color here, actually ivory black to be specific. But because there's paint underneath, I know that it's going to come up a little bit lighter. Go into the other side and try and draw this in so that it makes sense. Using a fairly large brush for a shape that's that small. When I say it's not a huge brush, but it's a big enough brush to you know, to sort of cover an area so that it doesn't look like tiny little fiddly brush strokes. I actually can't stand that when I see tiny little fiddly brush strokes. It's something that it doesn't feel very confident to me somehow. Maybe it doesn't need to feel confident. Maybe it just needs to look really real. Every artist has their own way, so there's no one way. There's your own way. I'm going to go into the nose here just a little bit more. Just define that a little better. Okay. And I need to soften these values out here. That paint, that white paint underneath, is still wet. And as I'm painting over this, it pulls through. So it actually, it does work. This method. Sorry, I'm shaking all over the place here. Sorry about that. Looks better when it's fuzzy on the screen. It's funny. Okay. All right. Let's just get things working around the eyes better. I want to get the shapes around the eyes working. I'm going to go in with a little more color here. And again, trying to keep these values right in the right place. I can go a little darker, a little heavier with the eyebrow. Now I don't know why this has become really fuzzy and really slow. So we have had some internet difficulties here, and maybe there's something going on here that I don't know about. As long as you can hear me, hopefully this will clear up in a little bit, because it's really quite fuzzy on the screen as I'm looking at it. Okay. I'm going to go in with, again, my soft brush and try and get the shape, this little light area that happens above the eye but before the eyebrow. Get that working right in there. That has to be knocked back a bit. Pull it up a little bit on that side. It's a little too light, but I know that if I go into that just with a few more brush strokes, that knocks it back. Okay. I'm going to go into that blue that I had down there before and just pull that up this way. Soften that down. I like to keep thinking about trying to keep areas soft where I can. Up here where I've got the hair going into the background, I can pull the color of flesh back into that and then pull the hair back down again. And that gives me a softer transition in the hairline. Again, cleaning my brush off in between every time. So I want to keep my color very clean through this. We can sort of see hair without seeing it all. You know, it's okay to do that. I'm going to bring a little more color over here. And I notice that there are little highlights in the hair over here, so I can get a bit of that going. We don't need to show every hair. It's just not important. It's jerking a bit. Yeah, sorry. It's been interesting doing these things. I keep learning as I go. The technology is challenging. Now there, I've just lost her ear completely because I want to get the shape of her face working. And then I'll go back and indicate that ear again. Just going to go in with some flesh color back in here and just a little something there and there, a little more definition. I've given her Spock ears now. It's kind of fun. That's one of the things about painting. You can do some funny things unintentionally. All right. Just going to try something here. I'm going to go to this screen All right, and then I'm going to go back. So this is really clear for me. I don't know if it is for you. When I go to solo layout on this one here, it looks a little fuzzy. And I don't know why. I had some other technical difficulties today, it seems. All right. I feel like I need more darks up top here to balance this thing out. I know it's the background, and like, well, why am I doing background when I'm trying to paint the face? But everything has to tie in together. So my gut's just telling me, you know, get more darkness up in here. That's where you need it. And maybe down in here as well. Okay. Where are we? 321. All right. I'm going to just put a couple more details into this. Little ones. She has blue eyes underneath all of this, believe it or not. And I'm going to just indicate her eyes a little more. And what I'll probably end up doing is carrying on with this a little later, adding a little more detail where I need to, and post that so you can see how it turned out. A little bit of gray blue happening in here. That's too bright, that blue. I need to bring it down in value. And I also need to see the whites of her eyes. And the whites of eyes, by the way, are never really white. They're more like a flesh color, actually. So that's just something to keep in mind. In fact, they can even be gray when you get into the shadow areas. Oh, she's looking really creepy. Unfortunately, you can't see it very well. If you're seeing it the way I am on my screen, it's not very obvious, unfortunately. So this is the first time that I'm actually running this through my phone. And because of the sound, I wanted the sound to really work well. And I think the sound's working okay, but unfortunately, the image that you're looking at, I think, is a little fuzzy. So getting everything to work properly is turning into being a big challenge. If you've been watching Stefan's videos, you can appreciate the quality that he's got going. And I'm really impressed with how he's been able to do that. He knows his way around cameras really well, so that helps. But he's been doing this for a while too, and he's got a lot of this stuff figured out, so I may have to go to him for some of his expertise. All right. I'm going to go back into the eyes just a little bit to get an accent here. And I'll do this on the other side as well. And unfortunately, when I'm looking at my screen, the image is not great. Okay, I'm going to try something here. I'm actually going to take my phone off this stand, and I want to, if I lose you, I'm sorry, but I'll try and get back to you. Just by moving the phone around, maybe that may help. It's still kind of fuzzy. Wow. Yeah, that's just really crazy. It seems like it's very, very slow, my internet connection. We've had trouble with it. Like I said, we've had trouble with it before. So I think what I'm going to do, because of where we are, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to put in a solo layout here. Maybe this camera is better. I don't know. I can't tell. Rita, you asked, is this my photo? It's not. I actually found this on the internet, and I just thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to paint that because she has such an interesting face. I think I'm going to need to actually, yeah, I was thinking what I might do is just cut out my phone camera because everything's so fuzzy. But if I do that, then I also cut off my sound. So I'm just going to call it now. Thank you for showing up. I know this was kind of really fuzzy and kind of weird, but hopefully you learned something from this today. I will do a little bit more work on this, and I'll post it, and hope that there was something in all of this that you were able to pick up and learn. I'm still working my way through this technology, so please forgive me for all the fuzzy and weirdness. Really appreciate you showing. If you think this is worth checking into every Friday, please do that. Come back. Maybe it'll be better next week. And pass it on to your friends or anyone who you think might be interested. If there's a young artist who's trying to learn something, give me a thumbs up if you think it was worth a thumbs up after all of that. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I know some of my older videos are cleaner than this, so I'm still working my way through this. I think when I was using my iPad to film, that was easier, or better technology. Yeah. So be safe, be well, and happy painting. And I know Bob Ross used to say, God bless. So God bless, and hopefully there was something in this that worked for you guys. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Anne, Michelle, Rita, Angelica. This is really great to see everyone here. Thanks, Somnath. Appreciate. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.